Moldavia is a historical region and former principality in Eastern Europe, corresponding to the territory between the Eastern Carpathians and the Dniester River. An initially independent and later autonomous state, it existed from the 14th century to 1859, when it united with Wallachia as the basis of the modern Romanian state. At various times, the state included the regions of Bessarabia and all of Bukovina. The western half of Moldavia is now part of Romania. The eastern side belongs to the Republic of Moldova, while the northern and southeastern parts are territories of Ukraine. Name and etymology. The original and short-lived reference to the region was Bogdania, after Bogdan, the founding figure of the principality. The names Moldavia and Moldova are derived from the name of the Moldova River. However, the etymology is not known and there are several variants. A legend mentioned in the Scriptio Moldaviae by Dimitri Cantemir links it to an aurochs hunting trip of the Maramure's voivode Dragoș and the latter's chase of a star-marked bull. Dragoș was accompanied by his female hound called Molda. When they reached shores of an unfamiliar river, Molda caught up with the animal and was killed by it. The dog's name would have been given to the river and extended to the country. The Old German Mulder, meaning open pit mine. The Gothic Mulder, meaning dust, dirt, referring to the river. A Slavic etymology, marking the end of one Slavic genitive form, denoting ownership, chiefly of feminine nouns. A landowner named Alexa Moldavich is mentioned in a 1334 document as a local boyar in service to Yari II of Halych. This attests to the use of the name before the foundation of the Moldavian state and could be the source for the region's name. In several early references, Moldavia is rendered under the composite form Moldo-Wallachia. Ottoman Turkish references to Moldavia included Bogdan I Flak and Bogdan. See also names in other languages. The name of the region in other languages include French, Moldavie, German, Moldai, Hungarian, Moldva, Russian, Moldavia, Turkish, Bogdan Prenslagi, Greek, Mu Omicron Lambda Delta Alpha Beta Iota Alpha. History. Prehistory and Antiquity. Early Middle Ages. The inhabitants of Moldova were Christians. Archaeological works revealed the remains of a Christian necropolis at Miloseni, Botoșani County, from the 5th century. The place of worship and the tombs had Christian characteristics. The place of worship had a rectangular form with sides of 8 and 7 meters. Similar necropolis and place of worship were found at Nicolina, in Iasi. The Bolohovani of Vlach population is mentioned by the Hypatian Chronicle in the 13th century. The chronicle shows that this land is bordered on the principalities of Halych, Volhynia and Kiev. Archaeological research also identified the location of 13th-century fortified settlements in this region. Alexandru V. Boulder identified Voskodavi, Voskodavti, Voloskovti, Volkovti, Volosovska and their other towns and villages between the middle course of the rivers Nitru, Dniester and Dnieper. The Bolohovani disappeared from chronicles after the defeat in 1257 by Daniel Romanovich's troops. In the early 13th century, the Brodniks, a possible Slavic Vlach vassal state of Halych, were present, alongside the Vlachs, in much of the region's territory. On the border between Halych and the Brodniks, in the 11th century, a Viking by the name of Rodfos was killed in the area by Vlachs who supposedly betrayed him. In 1164, the future Byzantine Emperor Andronicos I Komnenos was taken prisoner by Vlach shepherds around the same region. High Middle Ages. Later in the 14th century, King Charles I of Hungary attempted to expand his realm and the influence of the Catholic Church eastwards after the fall of Cuman rule. and ordered a campaign under the command of Finthad Mend. In 1342 and 1345, the Hungarians were victorious in a battle against Tatar Mongols. The conflict was resolved by the death of Yani Beg. In 1357, the Polish chronicler Jan Długosz mentioned Moldavians as having joined a military expedition in 1342, under King Vladislav I, against the Margraviate of Brandenburg. In 1353, Dragoș, mentioned as of Lachniaz in Maramureș, was sent by Louis I to establish a line of defense against the Golden Horde forces of Mongols on the Siret River. This expedition resulted in a polity vassal to Hungary, centered around Bogdan of Kuhar, another Vlach voivode from Maramureș who had fallen out with the Hungarian king, crossed the Carpathians in 1359, took control of Moldavia, and succeeded in removing Moldavia from Hungarian control. His realm extended north to the Cheremosh River, while the southern part of Moldavia was still occupied by the Tatar Mongols. After first residing in Ber, Bogdan moved Moldavia's seat to Siret, the area around Suceava, roughly correspondent to future Bukovina, formed one of the two administrative divisions of the new realm, under the name Arad Asas, whereas the rest, on both sides of the Prut River, formed Arad-Jos. Disfavored by the brief union of Angevin Poland and Hungary, Bogdan's successor Latcu accepted conversion to Roman Catholicism around 1370, but his gesture was to remain without consequences. Despite remaining officially Eastern Orthodox and culturally connected with the Byzantine Empire after 1382, princes of the House of Bogdan Musad entered a conflict with the Constantinople Patriarchy over control of appointments to the newly founded Moldavian metropolitan seat. Patriarch Antony IV even cast an anathema over Moldavia after Romania expelled his appointee back to Byzantium. The crisis was finally settled in favor of the Moldavian princes under Alexander I. Nevertheless, religious policy remained complex. While conversions to faiths other than Orthodox were discouraged, Moldavia included sizable Roman Catholic communities, as well as non-Chalcedonic Armenians. After 1460, the country welcomed Hussite refugees. The Principality of Moldavia covered the entire geographic region of Moldavia. In various periods, various other territories were politically connected with the Moldavian Principality. This is the case of the province of Pocatu, the fiefdoms of Cetia de Bolta and Siseu, or, at a later date, the territories between the Dniester and the Bug rivers. Petrui profited from the end of the Hungarian-Polish Union and moved the country closer to the Jagiellon realm, becoming a vassal of Vladislav II on September 26, 1387. This gesture was to have unexpected consequences. Petru supplied the Polish ruler with funds needed in the war against the Teutonic Knights, and was granted control over Pocatu until the debt was to be repaid, as this is not recorded to have been carried out. The region became disputed by the two states, until it was lost by Moldavia in the Battle of Obitin. Prince Petru also expanded his rule southwards to the Danube Delta. His brother Roman I conquered the Hungarian-ruled Cetia Alba in 1392, giving Moldavia an outlet to the Black Sea, before being toppled from the throne for supporting Fyodor Koryatovic in his conflict with Vytautas the Great of Lithuania. Under Stephen I, growing Polish influence was challenged by Sigismund of Hungary, whose expedition was defeated at Ghindaewani in 1385. However, Stephen disappeared in mysterious circumstances. Although Alexander I was brought to the throne in 1400 by the Hungarians, he shifted his allegiances towards Poland, and placed his own choice of rulers in Wallachia. His reign was one of the most successful in Moldavia's history. but also saw the very first confrontation with the Ottoman Turks at Setatia Alba in 1420, and later even a conflict with the Poles. A deep crisis was to follow Alexander's long reign, with his successors battling each other in a succession of wars that divided the country until the murder of Bogdan II and the ascension of Peter III-An in 1451. Nevertheless, Moldavia was subject to further Hungarian interventions after that moment, as Matthias Corvinus deposed Aron and backed Alexandrul to the throne in Suceava. Petru Aron's rule also signified the beginning of Moldavia's Ottoman Empire allegiance, as the ruler agreed to pay tribute to Sultan Mehmed II. Late Middle Ages under Stephen the Great, who took the throne and subsequently came to an agreement with Kazimierz IV of Poland in 1457. The state reached its most glorious period. Stephen blocked Hungarian interventions in the Battle of Ber, invaded Wallachia in 1471, and dealt with Ottoman reprisals in a major victory, after feeling threatened by Polish ambitions. He also attacked Galicia and resisted Polish reprisals in the Battle of the Kosman Forest. However, he had to surrender Chilia and Setatia Alba, the two main fortresses in the Bujak, to the Ottomans in 1484, and in 1498 he had to accept Ottoman suzerainty, when he was forced to agree to continue paying tribute to Sultan Bayezid II. Following the taking of Hocken and Pocatu, Stephen's rule also brought a brief extension of Moldavian rule into Transylvania. Setatia de Balta and Siseu became his fiefs in 1489. Early modern era and Renaissance under Bogdan III the One-Eyed. Ottoman overlordship was confirmed in the shape that would rapidly evolve into control over Moldavia's affairs. Peter IV Reyes, who reigned in the 1530s and 1540s, clashed with the Habsburg monarchy over his ambitions in Transylvania, was defeated in Pocatu by Poland, and failed in his attempt to extricate Moldavia from Ottoman rule. The country lost Bender to the Ottomans, who were included it in the Silistran Yale. A period of profound crisis followed. Moldavia stopped issuing its own coinage circa 1520, under Prince Shtephan, when it was confronted with rapid depletion of funds and rising demands from the Porte. Such problems became endemic when the country, brought into the Great Turkish War, suffered the impact of the stagnation of the Ottoman Empire. At one point, during the 1650s and 1660s, princes began relying on counterfeit coinage. The economic decline was accompanied by a failure to maintain state structures. The feudal-based Moldavian military forces were no longer convoked, and the few troops maintained by the rulers remained professional mercenaries such as the Simeni. However, Moldavia and the similarly affected Wallachia remained both important sources of income for the Ottoman Empire and relatively prosperous agricultural economies. In time, much of the resources were tied to the Ottoman economy, either through monopolies on trade that were only lifted in 1829, after the Treaty of Adrianople, or through the raised indirect taxes, the one demanded by the Ottomans from the princes, as well as the ones demanded by the princes from the country's population. Taxes were directly proportional with Ottoman requests, but also with the growing importance of Ottoman appointment and sanctioning of princes in front of election by the boyars and the boyar council. Sfacil boyaresc. The fiscal system soon included taxes such as the vacate, first introduced by Iancu Sassil in the 1580s. The economic opportunities offered brought about a significant influx of Greek and Levantine financiers and officials, who entered a stiff competition with the high boyars over appointments to the court. As the manor system suffered the blows of economic crisis, and in the absence of salarization, succession. Obtaining princely appointment became the major focus of a boyar's career. Such changes also implied the decline of free peasantry and the rise of serfdom, as well as the rapid fall in the importance of low boyars. However, they also implied a rapid transition towards a monetary economy, based on exchanges in foreign currency. Serfdom was doubled by the much less numerous slave population, composed of migrant Roma and captured Nogais. The conflict between princes and boyars was to become exceptionally violent. The latter group, who frequently appealed to the Ottoman court in order to have princes comply with its demands, was persecuted by rulers such as Alexandru Lapusninu and John III. Ioan Voda's revolt against the Ottomans ended in his execution. The country descended into political chaos, with frequent Ottoman and Tatar incursions and pillages. The claims of Musatans to the crown and the traditional system of succession were ended by scores of illegitimate reigns. One of the usurpers, Ioan Iasiobi Heraclid, was a Protestant Greek who encouraged the Renaissance and attempted to introduce Lutheranism to Moldavia. In 1595, the rise of the Movalesti boyars to the throne with Iremia Movila coincided with the start of frequent anti-Ottoman and anti-Habsburg military expeditions of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth into Moldavian territory, and rivalries between pretenders to the Moldavian throne encouraged by the three competing powers. The Wallachian Prince Michael the Brave, after previously taking over Transylvania, also deposed Prince Iremia Movila in 1600, and managed to become the first prince to rule over Moldavia, Wallachia, and Transylvania. The episode ended in Polish conquests of lands down to Bucharest, soon ended by the outbreak of the Polish-Swedish War and the re-establishment of Ottoman rule. Polish incursions were dealt a blow by the Ottomans during the 1620 Battle of Skora, which also saw an end to the reign of Gaspar Graziani. The following period of relative peace saw the more prosperous and prestigious rule of vassal Lupu, who took the throne as a boyar appointee in 1637, and began battling his rival Georg Shtephan, as well as the Wallachian Prince Matei Bessarab. However, his invasion of Wallachia with the backing of Cossack hetman Bohdan Khmelnytsky ended in disaster at the Battle of Finta. A few years later, Moldavia was occupied for two short intervals by the anti-Ottoman Wallachian Prince Constantine Shtephan, who clashed with the first ruler of the Ghica family, George Ghica. In the early 1680s, Moldavian troops under George Dukas intervened in right-bank Ukraine and assisted Mehmed IV in the Battle of Vienna, only to suffer the effects of the Great Turkish War. Fanriots during the late 17th century, Moldavia became the target of the Russian Empire's southwards expansion, inaugurated by Peter the Great during the Russo-Turkish War of 1710 to 1711. Prince Dmitry Cantemir's siding with Peter, an open anti-Ottoman rebellion, ended in defeat at Stănălăști, provoked Sultan Ahmed III's reaction, and the official discarding of recognition of local choices for princes, imposing instead a system which relied solely on Ottoman approval. The Fanariot epoch, inaugurated by the reign of Nicholas Mavrocordatos, short and frequently ended through violence. Fanariot rules were usually marked by political corruption, intrigue, and high taxation, as well as by sporadic incursions of Habsburg and Russian armies deep into Moldavian territory. Nonetheless, they also saw attempts at legislative and administrative modernization inspired by the Enlightenment, and signified a decrease in Ottoman demands after the threat of Russian annexation became real and the prospects of a better life led to waves of peasant emigration to neighboring lands. The effects of Ottoman control were also made less notable after the 1774 Treaty of Kukuk-Kainarka allowed Russia to intervene in favor of Ottoman subjects of the Eastern Orthodox faith, leading to campaigns of petitioning by the Moldavian boyars against princely policies. In 1712, Hotin was taken over by the Ottomans, and became part of a defensive system that Moldavian princes were required to maintain, as well as an area for Islamic colonization. Fragmentation. In 1775, Moldavia lost to the Habsburg Empire its northwestern part, which became known as Bukovina. For Moldavia, it meant both an important territorial loss and a major blow to the cattle trade. The 1792 Treaty of Jassy forced the Ottoman Empire to cede all of its holdings in what is now Transnistria to Russian Empire, which made Russian presence much more notable, given that the empire required a common border with Moldavia. The first effect of this was the cession of the eastern half of Moldavia to the Russian Empire, in 1812. Organic Statute. 1848 Revolution. Phanariot rules were officially ended after the 1821 occupation of the country by Alexander Ypsilantis' Philiki during the Greek War of Independence. The subsequent Ottoman retaliation brought the rule of Johan Sturza, considered as the first one of a new system, especially since, in 1826, the Ottomans and Russia agreed to allow for the election by locals of rulers over the two Danubian principalities, and convened on the mandating for 7-year terms. In practice, a new fundament to reigns in Moldavia was created by the Russo-Turkish War, and a period of Russian domination over the two countries which ended only in 1856, began as a military occupation under the command of Pavel Kislyov. Russian domination gave Wallachia and Moldavia, which were not removed from nominal Ottoman control, the modernizing Organic Statute. After 1829, the country also became an important destination for immigration of Ashkenazi Jews from the Kingdom of Galicia and Lodomeria and areas of Russia. The first Moldavian rule established under the statute, that of Mihail Sturza, was nonetheless ambivalent. Eager to reduce abuse of office, Sturza introduced reforms, but he was widely seen as enforcing his own power over that of the newly instituted Consultative Assembly. A supporter of the union of his country with Wallachia and of Romanian Romantic nationalism, he obtained the establishment of a customs union between the two countries and showed support for radical projects favored by low boyars. Nevertheless, he clamped down with noted violence the Moldavian revolutionary attempt in the last days of March 1848. Grigor Alexandru Ghica allowed the exile revolutionaries to return to Moldavia c. 1853, which led to the creation of the National Party, a transboundary group of radical union supporters which campaigned for a single state under a foreign dynasty. Slavery. Slavery was part of the social order from before the founding of the Principality of Moldavia, until it was abolished in stages during the 1840s and 1850s. Most of the slaves were of Roma ethnicity. There were also slaves of Tatar ethnicity, probably prisoners captured from the wars with the Nogai and Crimean Tatars. The institution of slavery was first attested in a 1470 Moldavian document, through which Prince Stephen the Great frees one, a Tatar slave who had fled to Jagiellon and Poland. The exact origins of slavery are not known, as it was a common practice in medieval Europe. As in the Byzantine Empire, the Roma were held as slaves of the state, of the boyars or of the monasteries. Historian Nicolae Iagor associated the Roma people's arrival with the 1241 Mongol invasion of Europe and considered their slavery as a vestige of that era. He believed that the Romanians took the Roma as slaves from the Mongols Mongols and preserved their status to control the labor. Other historians consider that the Roma were enslaved while captured during the battles with the Tatars. The practice of enslaving prisoners may also have been taken from the Mongols. The ethnic identity of the Tatar slaves is unknown. They could have been captured Tatars of the Golden Horde, Cumans, or the slaves of Tatars and Cumans. While it is possible that some Romani people were slaves or auxiliary troops of the Mongols or Tatars, most of them came from south of the Danube, demonstrating that slavery a widespread practice. The Tatar slaves, smaller in numbers, were eventually merged into the Roma population. Traditionally, Roma slaves were divided into three categories. The smallest was owned by the hospodars, and went by the Romanian language name of Tigani-Domnesti. The two other categories comprised Tigani Mănăstirești, who were the property of Romanian Orthodox and Greek Orthodox monasteries, and Tigani Boieriști, who were enslaved by the category of landowners. The abolition of slavery was carried out following a campaign by young revolutionaries who embraced the liberal ideas of the Enlightenment. In 1844, Moldavian Prince Mihail Sturza proposed a law on the freeing of slaves owned by the church and state. By the 1850s, the movement gained support from almost the whole of Romanian society. In December 1855, following a proposal by Prince Grigore Alexandru Guica, a bill drafted by Mihail Cogălniceanu and Petre Mavroveni was adopted by the Divan. The law emancipated all slaves to the status of taxpayers. Support for the abolitionists was reflected in Romanian literature of the mid-19th century. The issue of the Roma slavery became a theme in the literary works of various liberal and romantic intellectuals, many of whom were active in the abolitionist camp. The Romanian abolitionist movement was also influenced by the much larger movement against black slavery in the United States through press reports, and through a translation of Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, translated by Theodore Codrescu and first published in ISI in 1853, under the name Colibeluimo Sutoma Salviata Nigra Law in Cedul Statele United in America. It was the first American novel to be published in Romanian. The foreword included a study on slavery by Mihail Cogălniceanu. Union with Wallachia. Russian domination ended abruptly after the Crimean War, when the Treaty of Paris passed the two principalities under the tutelage of great European powers. Due to Austrian and Ottoman opposition and British reserves, the Union program as demanded by radical campaigners was debated intensely. In September 1857, given that Kaimakam Nicolae Vogoride had perpetrated fraud in elections in Moldavia, the powers allowed the two states to convene ad hoc divans, which were to decide a new constitutional framework. The result showed overwhelming support for the Union, as the creation of a liberal and neutral state. After further meetings among leaders of tutor states, an agreement was reached, whereby limited union was to be enforced, separate governments and thrones, with only two bodies. It also stipulated that an end to all privilege was to be passed into law, and awarded back to Moldavia the areas around Bulrad, Cahul and Ismail. However, the convention failed to note whether the two thrones could not be occupied by the same person, allowing Partid Național to introduce the candidacy of Alexandru Ioan Cuza in both countries. On January 17, in ISI, he was elected Prince of Moldavia by the respective electoral body, after street pressure over the much more conservative body in Bucharest. Cuza was elected in Wallachia as well, exactly 3 years later, after diplomatic missions that helped remove opposition to the action. The formal union created the United Principalities and instituted Cuza as Domnitor, this officially ending the existence of the Principality of Moldavia.